Components are the other type of contextual modeling structure, and creating one is very much like creating a group. Basically, you're putting your faces and edges into a container. The difference with components is that components have to have a name, and there are some additional options which we'll get to in another video. Right now we have two separate objects, but they're really collections of edges and faces right now, as you can see as I'm selecting various items. I'm going to select this collection and make it a group by pressing Command G. Then I'll select this collection by triple-clicking, and then I'll just press G to create a component. We have to give the component a name, and SketchUp is suggesting that we just call it component number 1, and that sounds fine for this simple demonstration, but in a real project you should use a meaningful name. The description field is optional, and these items here I'll talk about later. Make sure this is checked so that the selection will be replaced with the new component. Click Create, and you have a component. It looks the same. But the behavior is different than a group. To see this, it's necessary to make copies. Select the group and the component, and make a couple of copies. I'll type in 2x. These circles are groups, and the boxes are components. I'll double-click on this group to open it for editing, and I'll make some type of modeling change. Each group is unique. I'll close it and alter another group. This time I'll move the quadrant point in to make a cone. So the changes I make to one group have no relationship to the changes that I make to another one. Not so with components. Components are all connected. These components are actually representations of the same object. I'll open this component for editing by double-clicking on it, and then I'll make some type of modeling change. The change appears on all instances. This works just like blocks do in AutoCAD and instances do in 3ds Max. It's a common need that we have in 3D applications to have this differentiation between unique objects and objects that share the same geometry. Components are very efficient because SketchUp only has to remember the representation of what's inside the container one time, and then it merely needs to position these instances in different places in space multiple times. So it's essential that when you're creating many duplicates of an object, that you think ahead and create that as a component, and then the file size will be smaller, and you'll have more editing power over the myriad copies. It is also possible to make a component unique. For that one-off situation where you have a number of components, but you want one of them to be different. Here I'll select this component, right-click, and choose Make Unique. What that does is it creates it as a new component with a unique name, and we can see that in the outliner. We have two component number 1s and one component number 2 because this one is unique. All of the instances of a component share the same name. So I can double-click here to go into this component, make a modeling change, and it bears no relationship to the geometry in these other containers. So components that have the same name in the outliner are instances of each other. I'll open up this component for editing and make a modeling change to it, and you'll see that this one also changes in the same way. By the way, materials have a complex relationship with instances. Let's take a look at it. Press B to activate the paint bucket. The colors palette immediately appears. I'll choose red as the active color. Right now, all of my contextual structures are closed. I'll click on this component to color the instance itself. Everything inside the container turned red, but it didn't affect this other instance. I'll press the space bar to activate the Select tool. Double-click on the instance to open it for editing. I'll choose a different color and color this top face. Notice that this instance turned green here, so the behavior is different depending on whether you're painting the instance itself or what's contained inside the component. When you define something as a component, you have the opportunity to set its gluing plane, and that can be horizontal, vertical, sloped, or any of the above. To see how this works, it's necessary to open the Components window. Click on the house symbol to show all the components that are currently in the model. Right now there are none. I'll triple-click on this box to select all connected edges and faces, and then press G to define it as a component. Right now, it has a tripod right down here representing the insertion point for this component. By default, the gluing plane is set to none, which means I can insert this component anywhere I want. If I change this to any, the axis tripod turns into a square, and the blue axis is null, meaning this has to be attached to a plane. Now I'll go ahead and click Create, and then in a second the component appears over here in the Components window. I'll click on it, and it's attached to the cursor. Now when I bring it over here over this geometry, watch what happens. It automatically orients itself according to the surface that I'm over. I'll set it down here. I'll do it again. Set down 2 more components, and they're actually glued to these surfaces. I can move this over in the red direction or along the slope, but I can't move it out of plane. If I push the up arrow on the keyboard to set the blue inference, it doesn't lock, and I have this symbol next to the move cursor, which means that I have to stay in plane. So this is quite convenient because I can only move this skylight along the plane of the roof. Similarly, I can only move this window along the plane of the wall. I don't have the ability to pull it out of plane. Let's try another gluing plane. I'll explode this component and then redefine it as a new component. Press G, and SketchUp will call this one component number 2. This time I'll glue to a horizontal plane. Create. Component number 2 appears over here in the Components window. I'll click its icon, and then it's attached to the cursor. As I come over here, you'll see a circle with a line through it, indicating that I cannot attach this to a sloped face, nor will it stick to a vertical face. It can only be inserted on a horizontal face. So in this way, you can ensure that furniture doesn't end up being on the wall or on a sloped surface. Similarly, you can define components on a vertical plane or a sloped plane when you want to keep things like doors and windows on the wall or skylights on the roof. Now let's say that I want to create a component for a window that cuts an opening in the wall. I'm going to use the Offset tool to offset these edges on the top surface of this box in a short distance. And then I'll use the Push-Pull tool to push this interface down to the bottom of the box, thereby making a hole through the object. Triple-click to select All Connected and press G. Here we'll glue to a vertical surface because we want to make this a window, and we'll check here to say Cut Opening. Create. Click on the component in the Components window, and it's attached to the cursor. As you expect, you cannot insert it onto a sloped surface, nor can you insert it onto a horizontal surface. SketchUp is going to ensure that it has to be only on a vertical surface because of the gluing plane, and when I click a point, SketchUp will cut through the wall surface and create an opening. Now, unfortunately, this only works on a single surface. If you have a double-lined representation for your wall, SketchUp will not cut through both surfaces. So this feature can be useful, especially when you're making an exterior model of a house and you want to place a window that cuts an opening into the interior. You can do that. But if you have a more realistic depiction of the wall with thickness, you're going to have to use another method. So right now, using this cut openings method, we've cut a hole in the wall, but we don't have any glass in there. But that's not a problem. I can go back to my component instance over here and open it for editing. Then I can add a surface here. I'm going to heal this by drawing a line across the bottom. And then I'll reverse this surface so that it's facing outward. And then I'll press B to open up the Paint Bucket tool. I'll choose a pale blue color and set the opacity low. Click on the surface to create a partially transparent window. So this component now can be inserted in any vertical surface, and it will cut through the wall and show the glazing there. So basically, when you create components like this, Make them flat on the red-green plane, that is, on the ground. Define them with a vertical gluing plane, and then they'll become instant windows that cut through the wall. With skylights, you want to set sloped as your gluing plane.